Hello everybody, this is Dr. Cole, Sunday evening, October 18th, moving into week 10 of Con Law, Political Science 3753 for the fall 2020 term. Everyone, on the syllabus for this week, we have search and seizure, class notes for lectures 17 and 18. The following week, we have class notes for lectures 19 and 20 on free speech, and we'll have quiz number 6 on some free speech issues next week. So we'll say a little more to you about that a week from tonight. Search and seizure is an important issue for those in law enforcement, and I know many of our con law students are criminal justice majors. There are several issues raised in the class notes for lectures 17 and 18. I should say a little bit in particular about the requirement for a search warrant and the exceptions to that requirement. And you find that discussed largely in the class notes for lecture 17, extending over a little bit into the notes for lecture 18. Let me mention just a couple of issues. Generally, you cannot search someone's residence without a warrant. Okay. As they used to say, a man's home is his castle, and that is a principle that's pretty strictly respected in constitutional law. The one exception to that, the major exception, would be hot pursuit, where there's a suspect fleeing, perhaps that suspect is armed, perhaps not, but that suspect has ducked into a private residence. And so if law enforcement suspects that yours is one of the residences where that suspect might be, they can search without a warrant in that situation. But generally, you cannot search a private residence without a warrant. A major exception to the warrant requirement is the automobile. Generally, you cannot search someone's residence without a warrant, but the automobile is movable and can easily get away. And so the courts have recognized the automobile as an important exception to the search requirement. The automobiles often can be searched in circumstances where private residences could not be. Now, everybody, another important issue has to do with the Supreme Court decision of Terry versus Ohio, 1968. As everyone knows, it's been sort of a difficult time for many people in law enforcement the past few months, going back to the George Floyd killing. Many people in law enforcement feel under fire. Some of this goes back to the situation that was created by the Supreme Court decision of Terry versus Ohio, 1968. And the searches, so-called Terry searches, that were permitted under that Supreme Court decision. Now, this was one of the last decisions handed down by the Supreme Court under Chief Justice Earl Warren before he stepped down. Chief Justice Warren is known as a leading liberal in the history of the Supreme Court. But this particular decision perhaps broke the general pattern for which Earl Warren is known. It's been regarded as having more conservative than liberal implications in the years since 1968. Now, what the decision said in the case of Terry versus Ohio is that the Supreme Court would accept reasonable suspicion in lieu of probable cause in certain situations. Okay, now, the standard for searching someone is generally that there has to be probable cause. But in this case, the Supreme Court accepted reasonable suspicion in place of probable cause. And what that opened the way for is the law enforcement practice known as stop and frisk. And there are many people, big city mayors, people in law enforcement, who insist that they need the leeway to be able to stop and frisk suspicious individuals to cut down on crime. However, as we know, many of the people who end up being stopped and frisked turn out to be people of color, and they will feel often that they are being profiled. So this is something of a sore spot in law enforcement. But it goes back to the Supreme Court decision of Terry versus Ohio, 1968, that you'll be reading about in the class notes for lecture 17. Then next week, beginning next week, we move to issues such as freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, some of the rights and freedoms that are guaranteed to us under the First Amendment. We'll begin next week with freedom of speech, and you may be aware that freedom of speech is something of a fraught issue right now. You'll be reading pro and con pieces next week for quiz number 6 about the issue of so-called hate speech. Okay, but that's getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, because freedom of speech is not on the syllabus until next week. This week we have search and seizure and the collection of evidence in general. The class notes for lectures 17 and 18. And next week we'll have 19 and 20 on freedom of speech. And we'll do quiz number 6 next week, okay, on some freedom of speech related issues. And you've already received, you should have the assignment and the links to the 2 pieces we're going to ask you to read for quiz number 6 next week. But that's next week. We'll say more about it a week from tonight. This week, what we have on the syllabus is search and seizure and obtaining evidence. Now, everybody, I've been contacted by a couple of people who are concerned about how they're doing in the course, and I wanted to say just a word about it. On the midterm exam, it was sort of feast or famine. There were several students who scored in the 90s, several others who scored only in the 50s or 60s. So some students are concerned about how they're doing. Now, listen to me carefully. Your grade will be based on 300 points. The lowest grade of either the midterm exam or the set of the best 5 out of 8 quizzes, that grade will be dropped. Now, you still have 3 quizzes, the final exam, and a term paper to do. That means 260 out of those possible 300 points are still available. So those who are carrying some low grades, you need to improve, but you still have a chance to get out of the course successfully. And remember also, everybody, several of you, although you may have been struggling up to now, you also may have enough logins to qualify for that 25-point attendance bonus that will be added to your point total when grades are compiled and turned in at the end of the term. And if you'd like to know how you're doing on that, contact me. Okay. So for those who may be concerned about how they're doing, what I would say is reading comprehension is much of this. So you may want to make a greater time commitment to the quiz material and also the material for the final exam, which will be quite a bit, the class notes for lectures 13 through 27. And remember also, everybody, the term paper is in your hands. You have a few weeks, so you shouldn't be too rushed. We've sent you a list of cases. I hope you look at those and get in touch with me, especially if you're concerned about how you're going to do on the term paper. Well in advance of writing the term paper, mention to me your choice of topic, and I will try to give you some pointers and be as helpful as I can. Remember, your paper should be based on a Supreme Court case or maybe a set of related cases, but it could focus in on a single case. And we sent you a list of a couple of pages of recent cases that we thought might be of interest. If there's anything else you can think of, contact me. And if you see anything on that list that interests you, that you think you'd like to take up as your topic for the term paper, well, once you settle on that, contact me about that as well. Okay. So, some people are doing better than others, but I think there's still a chance for everybody to get out of this course successfully. Now, everybody, there is a certain degree of literacy that is needed to get through this course. Okay? And if you're not confident about that now, maybe you'll be in a better position to do that later. Okay? The course will be offered every fall. At least those are our plans. We've offered it every fall for some time. Okay? The drop date is November 19th, so you still have about a month before you would need to decide whether or not you're going to drop. That is the Thursday before Thanksgiving, 1 week before Thanksgiving, Thursday the 19th. So, at this time, I'm not especially eager for anybody to drop. Okay, if you think it's wise for you to do that, you have some time to make that decision. But Everybody has a chance. And if you've been struggling up to now, I would say make a little more of a time commitment to go through this material that may be challenging reading for some of you. So take a little more time and you can improve with any luck. All right, so we will be looking at search and seizure this week. We'll say more a week from tonight about our material for quiz number 6 on free speech, which is coming up next week. So you have plenty to get to work on. Contact me if I can help you. Otherwise, take it easy.